You probably imagine artificial intelligence as software, weightless, invisible, somewhere in the cloud. But the cloud is becoming a physical neighbor, built beside homes, roads, and fields in structures closer to factories than to anything floating in the sky. Behind windowless walls sit thousands of servers, cooling systems, substations, and backup generators. The buildings can cover tens of thousands of square meters. Government wants more of them, quickly. So what, exactly, are ordinary communities being asked to live next to? Britain designated data centers as critical national infrastructure in 2024. That recognizes a real dependency. Hospitals, banks, councils, and businesses all rely on digital services that have to run somewhere. The cloud is not optional infrastructure. It is concealed infrastructure. AI is adding to that demand, but a crucial distinction matters. A new data center may support cloud services, storage, streaming, government systems, or AI workloads. Unless an operator says so, a planning application does not prove which computers will do what. These buildings cannot simply go anywhere. They need large electricity connections, dense fiber routes, suitable land, and, for some services, very low delay to other facilities. That pulls development toward established clusters, often at the edges of towns already carrying infrastructure. National policy now tells planners to identify suitable locations for data centers and their grid connections. AI growth zones go further. Government proposes stronger planning support, protected land, faster consents, and, where ministers judge it necessary, direct intervention. Yet most projects still arrive as local planning cases. National strategy talks about compute capacity and investment. A council must judge a particular lane, skyline, water system, and group of neighbors. That difference in scale is where the conflict begins. At Abbots Langley in Hertfordshire, that conflict is unusually clear. The outline proposal allows up to 84,000 square meters of data center floor space across 2 buildings, with plant, generators, roads, a substation, and a new country park. Three Rivers District Council refused permission. The appeal was recovered for a national decision, and in May 2025 the Secretary of State allowed it. But the most revealing part of the decision is not that local harm disappeared. It is that the harm was recorded. The decision said 2 buildings up to 20 meters high would substantially change the site's character in a way that could not be fully mitigated. It gave significant weight to landscape harm, even while judging the wider visual effect relatively localized. It also identified harm to the settings of nearby heritage assets. That harm was judged less than substantial in planning language, but the decision still gave it great weight. This was not a finding of no impact. On the other side of the balance sat a clear and pressing need for capacity, a lack of sufficient alternative sites, roughly £1 billion of proposed investment, employment, biodiversity measures, and a publicly accessible country park. The inspector accepted projections of about 210 operational jobs. But he also noted those jobs would not necessarily go to Hertfordshire residents. Around 2,500 construction period jobs were forecast, and given only limited weight because they were temporary. The final balance was explicit: significant landscape harm and heritage harm on one side, national need, investment, and other benefits on the other. Permission was granted. The harm was not dismissed. It was outweighed. 20 miles away, at Iver, the proposed Woodlands Park development shows why that balance can remain unsettled. It would place up to 72,000 square meters of data center space in 2 buildings on a former landfill site, with generators, fuel storage, and a substation. Buckinghamshire Council refused it. Ministers overturned that decision in July 2025, despite giving significant weight to adverse landscape and visual effects. Campaign groups then challenged the approval over the environmental assessment and the promises used to justify it. In January 2026, the government accepted that its decision contained a serious logical error. Mitigation it had relied upon was not actually secured. By April, the developer accepted that environmental measures would need to be made binding through an agreement with the council. That does not make Iver a simple story of approved or cancelled. It remains a proposed data center shaped by refusal, ministerial approval, and a legal settlement that changed what had to be enforceable. Planning permission is not the end of public scrutiny. So what can living beside this infrastructure involve? First, construction, earthworks, concrete, cranes, worker traffic, and heavy vehicles. Those effects are temporary, but a multi-building industrial project can make temporary a meaningful part of local life. Then comes the permanent scale. Data halls are broad, secure, and mostly windowless. Roof plant, cooling equipment, fences, lighting, and new substations can change a village edge even when landscaping eventually screens parts of the view. Noise is design-specific, not inevitable at one level. Cooling fans and ventilation plant can create a steady industrial sound. Emergency generators add periodic testing. Planning conditions can limit noise and operating procedures, but only if the limits are specific, monitored and enforced. Water needs the same care. Some evaporative cooling systems can consume substantial water. Air-cooled designs use far less directly. The real question is the technology, the local water source, the season, and the combined demand of nearby sites, not a single dramatic number applied everywhere. Power still matters locally, even though it was episode 2 subject. A large connection can bring a new substation, cables and backup plant into the landscape. The grid explains why the site matters nationally. Planning reveals who experiences that infrastructure locally. Developers and government also point to benefits, capital investment, construction contracts, technical jobs, business rates, training, landscaping and sometimes community facilities. Those can be real. But 3 questions matter: how local, how durable, and how firmly secured. At Abbots Langley, a proposed local training and skills package sounded substantial, £12 million. In the official planning balance, however, it received no weight. The inspector said it was unclear how the figure had been calculated, what it would fund, or whether it was necessary. The obligation was not erased, but the decision did not rely on it as a reason to approve the scheme. That distinction is the heart of community benefit. An attractive promise is not the same as an enforceable, justified outcome. Waste heat offers another tempting promise. Servers release heat continuously. In the right place, that energy can help warm homes or businesses. At Old Oak and Park Royal, government committed £36 million to a network intended to connect more than 10,000 homes. But heat does not travel from a server rack into a radiator by goodwill. It needs nearby demand, heat pumps, pipes, finance, long-term operators and agreements that survive changes of owner. Without that system, warm exhaust is simply waste. At Abbots Langley, potential district heating received only limited weight because there were few details and no specific local network plan. The promise was technically possible. The benefit was not yet secured. This is the larger collision. To national government, data centers are strategic infrastructure for growth, resilience and AI. To local government, they are also planning applications with neighbors, water constraints, roads, landscapes and competing demands for land. Both perspectives are real. The imbalance is information. Councils may be asked to judge a huge facility without knowing the eventual operator, workload or reliable site-level resource use. Communities hear national claims about growth, while the most visible consequences arrive as lorries, fencing and a changed horizon. There is a better bargain available. Put likely energy, water, noise and construction impacts into public view early. Let local people influence access routes, buffers and community priorities before the design hardens. Do not ask a press release to do the work of a planning obligation. Then secure the benefits, training with a defined budget and delivery body, local procurement that can be measured, heat reuse only where a funded network exists, environmental commitments written so they bind whoever eventually operates the site. None of that means every objection should stop a project. It means strategic importance should raise the standard of the bargain, not lower it. If a facility serves a national need, the evidence and the local settlement should be strong enough to survive scrutiny. Society wants the services these buildings provide, and AI will demand more computing capacity. But the communities hosting that capacity should not be treated as empty space between a fiber route and a substation. Their homes are part of the infrastructure decision too. The cloud was never nowhere. It has walls, fans, roads, wires, and neighbors. The question is no longer whether we build it. It is whether the people living beside it get an honest voice, an enforceable return, and a fair share of the future arriving next door.